What if a humble cook were dragged into a business dinner by an arrogant millionaire, only to be humiliated? That was Arthur's intention, but what Clara did that night turned the tables in a surprising way. Get ready for a story of talent, overcoming challenges, and a twist that no one saw coming. Clara Williams was a 28-year-old young woman, a skilled cook with a heart full of dreams. Working in the mansion of millionaire Arthur McAllister, Clara transformed simple ingredients into true culinary masterpieces. Her talent was undeniable, but her life was far from the luxuries she helped provide for others. Clara lived in a small apartment in downtown Boston, located in an old building with windows that creaked at the slightest breeze. The living room was simple but extremely well kept, with a modest bookshelf where she proudly stored her collection of cookbooks. Some were new, with shiny covers, while others were worn relics, inherited from her grandmother, a woman who had taught her the importance of cooking with love. On the wooden countertop of her kitchen, there was a row of glass jars filled with spices organized in alphabetical order, and her pots, shining as if they were new, hung on hooks on the wall. Clara had a small gas stove, which, despite being old, worked perfectly thanks to her care. It was there that she spent her nights testing new flavor combinations and jotting down her creations in a red-covered notebook. Her routine started early. Before 7 in the morning, Clara was already up, putting on a spotless white apron over her simple clothes. After a quick coffee, she took the crowded subway and headed to the McAllister mansion, where she began planning the day's menu. Arthur, her boss, was a cold and imposing man who rarely exchanged more than a few words with Clara. He was always busy with meetings, business dinners, and social events, and seemed to see Clara as nothing more than an invisible employee. However, Clara did not let her boss's indifference dampen her spirits. "Good morning, Mr. McAllister," she would say every morning, even if he only murmured something inaudible in response. When she wasn't in the kitchen, Clara moved unnoticed through the long corridors of the house, always ready to meet the demands of the moment. Clara's dedication was evident in every detail. For Arthur's business dinners, she prepared sophisticated dishes, such as lamb fillet with red wine sauce and delicate desserts, like Belgian chocolate mousses decorated with edible gold leaves. Despite her efforts, recognition was almost non-existent. Arthur rarely commented on the food, and the compliments from guests, although frequent, never reached her directly. Even so, Clara felt proud to see the plates returning empty to the kitchen. At night, when she finally returned to her apartment, Clara dedicated herself to writing in her notebook or watching cooking shows on television, always seeking inspiration to continue honing her skills. She dreamed of one day opening her own restaurant, a place where she could serve her creations and finally be recognized for the work she did with such passion. Despite the exhausting routine and the lack of appreciation from Arthur, Clara kept a smile on her face and a glimmer of hope in her eyes. With each new day, she believed she was closer to realizing her dreams, even if the path seemed long and lonely. After all, for Clara, true wealth lay in dedication, in the love for what she did, and in the ability to transform even the simplest meal into a special moment. Arthur McAllister was the embodiment of vanity and power. At just over 50 years old, he had built his financial empire with cunning and relentless ambition, but his success came with an evident disdain for anything he considered inferior. Clara Williams, with her humble background and discreet manners, was the perfect target for his veiled contempt, a glaring contrast to the world of luxury and influence he inhabited. That night, the mansion was filled with guests for an important business meeting. The chandeliers sparkled, the crystal glasses shone under the light, and lively conversation filled the air as Clara worked tirelessly in the kitchen. She had prepared a feast that included herb-crusted grilled salmon, truffle risotto, and a lemon meringue cake, each dish a testament to her skill and dedication. Despite her efforts, Clara knew that her presence would be noticed only for the food she served, not for who she was. Arthur was in his usual position at the head of the table, the center of attention. He exuded an almost arrogant confidence as he discussed investments and strategies with his guests, but a sardonic smile appeared on his lips when the compliments began to flow. "This risotto is simply divine," commented one of the businessmen, raising his glass in approval. "Arthur, you really know how to please your guests." Another added, "The dessert is magnificent. The meringue is perfectly airy." Who is responsible for this? Arthur, who had until then been nodding politely, saw an opportunity for his cruel humor. He lifted his chin with a condescending look and replied, "Ah, it's the work of my cook, Clara, a simple young woman, but with surprising talent. A true miracle, considering where she comes from." The laughter that followed was discreet, but Arthur did not fail to notice the looks of curiosity and amusement. To him, Clara was a convenient tool, someone to be showcased as proof of his supposed generosity, although he held no genuine respect for her. In fact, his mind was already beginning to devise a plan. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Clara was busy cleaning the kitchen, Arthur entered the room. He watched for a moment as she organized the utensils with the precision of someone who loved what they did. "Clara," he called, with a tone that mixed coldness and superiority. She turned quickly, surprised to see him there. "Yes, Mr. McAllister?" "I was thinking," he began, crossing his arms. "Next week, I will have a very important dinner with some businessmen. I want you to be present." Clara blinked, confused. "Present? I don't understand, sir. Do you want me to help serve the dishes?" Arthur let out a dry laugh. "No, Clara. I want you to sit at the table, to be my guest. It will be an enriching experience for everyone. Just imagine a humble young woman like you interacting with the big names in the financial market." Clara hesitated, feeling a growing discomfort. His tone seemed strange, almost mocking, but she did not dare question him. "If that is what you wish, I will do my best." Arthur smiled, satisfied. "Great. Dress appropriately. I don't want them to think I'm bringing someone unprepared." As he left, Clara stood still, trying to understand the reason behind the invitation. To her, it seemed like an unexpected opportunity, but to Arthur, it was just a piece in his game. He was already imagining the surprised looks and the disguised comments from his colleagues upon seeing Clara, simple and out of place, amidst the luxury. Deep down, the dinner would be yet another way to feed his own ego while diminishing Clara in front of everyone. The morning after the business dinner, Arthur McAllister summoned Clara to his office. It was rare for him to speak more than a few words directly to her, and Clara felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension as she walked through the mansion's corridors. The office was spacious, with shelves full of books whose spines gleamed as if they had never been opened. Arthur was sitting in his imposing leather chair, typing something on his laptop, but he closed the screen as soon as Clara entered. "Mr. McAllister, you called for me?" Clara asked, with her usual respectful tone. Arthur raised his eyes to her, his expression rehearsing a false kindness. "Yes, Clara. I have something important to discuss with you. Please have a seat." Clara obeyed, a little nervous. It felt strange to be in that room with him, who usually ignored her. Arthur leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "Clara, you have been doing satisfactory work here in the mansion. Last night, your dishes were highly praised, and I started to think about how you have the potential for something more." She blinked, surprised. "Potential, sir?" "Yes," he continued in a calculated tone. "Next week, I will have another business dinner here at home. It will be an important meeting with high-level businessmen, and I want you to be present, but not as a cook. I want you to sit at the table as my guest." Clara was momentarily speechless. "Me? A guest? I'm not sure I understood correctly, sir." Arthur smiled in a way that seemed more condescending than friendly. "That's right, Clara. You will have a chance to step out of the kitchen and interact with important people. Consider this a golden opportunity, something that could open doors for you. Of course, you will need to be presentable. I can't take you to the table in the apron you wear here. Go find something suitable to wear. Oh, and be ready to make a good impression." Clara, still trying to process what that meant, felt a mix of emotions. Was Arthur finally recognizing her worth? Despite his somewhat dismissive tone, she couldn't help but feel a slight excitement. "Thank you, Mr. McAllister. I will do my best." "Great," he replied, already turning his attention back to the laptop. "You can go." Back in her apartment, Clara immediately went to find Rosa, her neighbor and best friend. Rosa, a warm and energetic woman, was the person Clara turned to in moments of doubt. When Clara told her what had happened, Rosa's eyes widened, clearly surprised. "He invited you to a dinner? At the table? Is this for real, Clara?" Rosa asked as she put the kettle on the stove. "That's what he said," Clara replied, still a bit confused. "He said it was a golden opportunity, but he also mentioned that I need to be presentable." "Rosa, you know I don't have anything like that in my closet. Can you help me? Rosa broke into a wide smile. Of course. We'll figure this out. I have a navy blue dress you can try on, and if it doesn't fit, I know a thrift store where we can find something nice and cheap. The two spent the rest of the day sifting through options. Rosa brought a navy blue dress that she had worn once to a wedding, and with a few handmade adjustments, the dress fit Clara perfectly. Rosa also lent her a pair of low-heeled shoes, knowing that Clara wasn't used to wearing high heels. You look beautiful, Clara, Rosa said with a proud smile as she styled Clara's hair into a simple, elegant bun. No matter what happens at this dinner, you will show that you are much more than a cook. Clara looked in the mirror and, for a moment, hardly recognized herself. The dress delicately accentuated her figure, and the hairstyle highlighted her bright eyes. For the first time, she felt truly special. Despite her insecurity about Arthur's intentions, Clara decided to approach the dinner with optimism. Perhaps, she thought, this was the beginning of something greater. On the night of the dinner, Clara felt torn between anxiety and determination. Rosa had spent hours with her, making sure every detail was perfect. The borrowed navy blue dress was simple, but highlighted her natural elegance. Her hair, styled in a low bun, framed her illuminated face, and a pair of small pearl earrings, also lent by Rosa, completed the look. Clara, looking at herself in the mirror, took a deep breath before leaving the house, determined to face whatever was to come. Arthur had insisted that the dinner be at a luxurious restaurant in the heart of Boston, known for hosting the city's business elite. Clara arrived punctually, guided by Arthur's driver, and felt the weight of curious gazes from the other patrons as soon as she entered. The main dining room was impressive, with crystal chandeliers, impeccably decorated tables, and waiters who seemed to move like choreographed dancers. She spotted Arthur in the back, sitting with a group of men and women who exuded confidence and wealth. Clara, finally, Arthur exclaimed as he saw her approaching. He partially stood up from his chair, more to attract the attention of others than out of any genuine gesture of courtesy. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce my talented chef. The introduction was followed by a brief but heavy silence. Everyone's eyes turned to Clara, examining her from head to toe. She felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but forced herself to maintain her composure, straightening her shoulders. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Clara said with a polite smile. Her voice came out firm, although discomfort began to settle in. Arthur smiled, but there was something in his tone that seemed slightly cruel. "Clara is responsible for those incredible dishes you've all praised in our previous meetings. A true artist, even coming from such modest circumstances." He emphasized the last word, eliciting smirks from some of the businessmen. One of the men, wearing a watch as flashy as it was expensive, leaned slightly in her direction. "Arthur always talks a lot about you. But tell me, how does a young woman like you learn to cook so well?" Clara took a deep breath, trying to ignore the implied insinuation. "I grew up helping my grandmother in the kitchen. She taught me the importance of cooking with dedication and creativity. After that, I studied on my own and learned through practice and love for what I do." "How admirable," commented an elegantly dressed woman, but her tone sounded more condescending than genuine. "It's always nice to see people, hardworking." Arthur laughed, leaning toward the table. "I said she is an example of overcoming challenges. That's why I brought her here tonight. I thought it would be inspiring for all of us." Clara began to feel the weight of each person's gaze. Despite Arthur's words seeming complimentary, the tone carried an irony that did not go unnoticed by her. He was not presenting her as a talented professional, but as a curiosity, almost like a trophy of his benevolence. When dinner was served, Arthur made a point to mention that Clara probably knew every detail of the dish. "You should teach the chefs here, Clara. After all, if someone like you can prepare exceptional dishes, imagine what they could learn from you," he remarked, accompanied by low laughter from some of the attendees. Clara, despite the growing discomfort, maintained her impeccable posture. She responded with serenity, refusing to show any weakness. Meanwhile, her mind raced, reflecting on the true purpose of that night. It was not a recognition of her work, as she had naively hoped. It was a public display, a power play by Arthur, in which she was merely a pawn. As the dinner progressed, the guests, who had initially regarded Clara with a mix of curiosity and condescension, began to take a genuine interest in her. The conversation, which had previously revolved around business and investments, gradually shifted focus, drawn in by the articulate responses and captivating stories Clara shared. "So, Clara," asked one of the businessmen, an older man with graying hair and attentive eyes, "how did you acquire so much knowledge about cooking? Arthur told us you didn't attend traditional schools." Clara, who had until then participated in the conversation discreetly, took a deep breath before responding. "That's true, sir. I grew up in a simple home, but the kitchen was always the heart of our household. My grandmother was an amazing cook, and she taught me not just recipes, but also the importance of understanding and respecting the ingredients. After she passed away, I started seeking knowledge on my own. I read everything I could about cooking, attended free workshops, and even took online classes with renowned chefs." She paused, smiling. "Oh, and I also worked in smaller restaurants before coming to work for Mr. McAllister. That's where I learned to handle pressure and improvise." The woman who had previously commented condescendingly now seemed intrigued. "You seem to know the culinary world very well. What is your favorite dish to prepare?" Clara thought for a moment, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "I love making risotto. It's a dish that seems simple, but it requires patience and attention to achieve the perfect texture. It's almost meditative, actually. Each ingredient needs to work in harmony." The gray-haired businessman smiled, raising his glass of wine. "You seem to have a genuine passion, Clara. But tell me, what do you think of this wine? It's a Cabernet Sauvignon from a famous winery in California. I bet a palate like yours has an interesting opinion." Clara looked at the glass in front of her, swirling the liquid gently before bringing it to her lips. After savoring the wine, she spoke confidently. "It's an elegant wine, with notes of cassis and a slight hint of vanilla, probably from the oak it was aged in. It's balanced, but a bit young. With a few more years, the tannins will soften, and the flavor will become even rounder." The comment elicited a murmur of approval. "Impressive," said the businessman. "You have a refined palate." Arthur, sitting at the head of the table, was beginning to show signs of irritation. He crossed his arms and tapped his foot discreetly on the floor, watching as Clara became the center of attention. This was not what he had planned. The idea was for Clara to be an obvious contrast to the guests, something he could use to highlight his generosity. But now, she not only fit into the environment but also overshadowed the others. "Clara," Arthur said abruptly, trying to regain control of the conversation, "you're fascinating our guests so much that I bet they're forgetting the real reason for this dinner." He let out a forced laugh, but the tone betrayed his discomfort. Clara smiled politely. "I certainly don't want to divert the focus, Mr. McAllister. I'm just answering the questions." A young businessman, sitting close to Clara, did not let Arthur's interruption go unnoticed. "Actually, Arthur, I find this conversation one of the most interesting we've had at your dinners. Usually it's just the same old thing about profits and market strategies. It's refreshing to hear someone speak with such passion and authenticity." Arthur tried to maintain his smile, but the discomfort was evident. "Yes, of course, Clara has her qualities, but we need to remember that she's still starting to understand how the world really works." Before the comment could cut the moment, Clara responded naturally. "Absolutely, Mr. McAllister. And that's exactly why I value these opportunities so much. Every day is a chance to learn something new." The gray-haired businessman smiled once more. "Well, you certainly taught us a few things tonight, Clara. Your story and perspective are inspiring." The dinner continued with an atmosphere that had completely changed. Clara, with her authenticity and knowledge, had captured the attention and admiration of everyone. The businessmen, now much more interested in her than in the usual business topics, were asking questions about her journey and experiences. Each of Clara's responses came with a polite yet sincere smile, and the empathy she conveyed was palpable. Arthur McAllister, on the other hand, was visibly uncomfortable. The control he so valued was beginning to slip from his grasp, and the irritation on his face became more evident with each passing minute. He tried to redirect the conversation to more traditional topics, but he was constantly ignored by the guests, who preferred to hear what Clara had to say. It was then that one of the businessmen, the gray-haired man who had already been impressed by her knowledge of wines, raised an unexpected question. He leaned toward Arthur, his eyes shining with curiosity. "Arthur, tell me something. Why is someone as talented as Clara still working as your cook?" With the knowledge and passion she has, she should already be managing her own restaurant or at least holding a prominent position in one of your companies. Have you never thought of promoting her? The question hung in the air, causing a brief silence. All eyes turned to Arthur, who looked taken aback. He laughed, but the sound was tense, almost forced. Well, Clara is, how can I put it? Unique. She's good at what she does, of course, but not everyone has the skills necessary to go beyond the kitchen. Clara, hearing this, maintained a serene expression, but inside she felt a pang of pain. Despite this, she said nothing, waiting to see how far Arthur would take it. The gray-haired businessman insisted, noticing Arthur's discomfort. Arthur, with all due respect, you are underestimating a rare gem. Someone like Clara can do extraordinary things if she has the right support. Arthur sighed, his patience clearly worn thin. He placed his wine glass on the table with a slight clink and leaned forward, addressing the businessman and the other guests with a harsh and barely concealed tone. Let's be clear, gentlemen. Clara is here today because I wanted her to be. She wouldn't have anything she has if it weren't for me. This dinner was my idea, to show you how someone so simple can thrive under the right guidance. She is nothing more than a living example of luck. Luck for being by my side. The statement echoed like thunder in the room. The murmur of conversation ceased, and the guests exchanged shocked glances. Clara, although deeply hurt, remained composed. She straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath before responding in a controlled but firm tone. Mr. McAllister, if I may, I have a different perspective. It is true that I am grateful for having had the chance to work in your mansion, but my work and dedication come from years of effort and learning. Luck may open doors, but it is our choices and determination that allow us to stay and thrive. If I have come this far, it is because I have never given up on improving, no matter the situation. The businessman looked at Clara with renewed respect. The gray-haired man was the first to speak. Well said, Clara. The talent and passion you have shown today are not the result of luck. They are the result of hard work. Arthur, you should pay more attention to what is right in front of you. Arthur did not respond immediately. He seemed torn between anger and the need to maintain composure. Yes, of course, he said, forcing a smile. Clara has always been very dedicated, but the attempt to smooth over the situation did not convince anyone. The damage was done. The businessmen clearly had a new perception of Arthur and of Clara. To them, she was no longer just a cook, but a talented, strong, and resilient woman who shone despite Arthur's attempts to keep her in the background. The morning after the dinner, the atmosphere in Arthur McAllister's mansion was tense. He, still irritated by the events of the previous night, avoided any interaction with Clara. For him, the way the cook had stolen the show was a blow to his ego, something he was not willing to admit, but it was eating away at him inside. Clara, on the other hand, arrived to work as she did every day, with the same serene demeanor, although she knew that something was about to change in her life. However, the twist happened faster than she imagined. Around noon, the intercom rang. Clara answered, and to her surprise, the visitor was Peter Langston, a renowned businessman in the culinary sector, owner of a chain of high-end restaurants in New York. He had been one of the guests at the dinner and was clearly impressed with Clara. "Clara, I hope I'm not interrupting," he said as he entered, with a warm smile. "I needed to talk to you. Last night, you demonstrated a talent and a passion for cooking that are rare. Frankly, I can't stop thinking about what we could do together." Clara blinked, incredulous. "Excuse me, Mr. Langston, but I'm not sure I understood correctly." Peter laughed. "Let me be direct. I'm about to open a new restaurant in Manhattan. It's a special project, something I want to be a reference in modern gastronomy. And I want you as my head chef." Clara's world stopped for a moment. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Me? Do you really think I'm capable of taking on such an important position?" Peter raised an eyebrow. "Think, Clara, I'm sure. You not only have the knowledge and talent, but also a unique vision. That's exactly what I'm looking for in this new restaurant. Of course, we'll need to discuss the details, but I would like to know if you're interested." Clara looked at him, emotional, feeling a wave of gratitude and excitement. I am interested, Mr. Langston. Very interested. This opportunity is a dream. I don't even know how to thank you." Peter smiled warmly. "Thank me by accepting the challenge. We both know you're more than ready." At that moment, Arthur entered the room, drawn by the conversation. He had heard enough to understand what was happening, and his face hardened. "Peter, what is this? Are you taking my cook?" Peter, unperturbed, shrugged. "Arthur, I'm not taking anyone. I'm offering Clara an opportunity to grow, something you clearly neglected. Her talent deserves to be recognized." Arthur laughed, but the sound was forced. "Well, if that's what Clara wants, of course I support it. I've always encouraged my team to seek the best for themselves." Clara, who knew well the sarcasm hidden in Arthur's tone, remained calm. "Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Working here has been a valuable experience, but I feel that this is a unique chance that I cannot let pass." Arthur nodded, but there was a glint of irritation in his eyes. "Of course, and who am I to stop you?" After a few more minutes of conversation, Peter and Clara scheduled a meeting in New York to discuss the details of the contract and the concept of the restaurant. When he left, Clara was alone in the room for a moment, feeling a mix of emotions: excitement for the future, gratitude for the opportunities opening up, and a touch of sadness for leaving what she knew behind. Arthur, who had remained silent, finally broke the ice. "So that's it. You're going to leave here and leave me hanging." Clara looked at him firmly, but without resentment. "Mr. McAllister, I have always given my best to serve this house. I have learned a lot here, but now it is time to move on. I am ready to face new challenges." He huffed, unable to completely hide his discontent, but said nothing more. Clara politely said goodbye, leaving Arthur alone to deal with the weight of his choices and his wounded pride. That night, when she got home, Clara told Rosa about the offer. The two celebrated with a simple but meaningful dinner, a toast to courage and the future that awaited Clara. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt that the world was truly opening up for her, and that every step she had taken to get there had been worth it. Months had passed since that decisive night, and Clara Williams' life had transformed spectacularly. Now the head chef of Lumiere, a sophisticated restaurant in Manhattan, Clara led a team with the same passion and dedication she had always put into everything she did. Lumiere, with its modern decor and welcoming atmosphere, had quickly become one of the most sought-after spots in the city, attracting food critics, celebrities, and food lovers from all corners. Clara, in her new routine, was completely in her element. Wearing her immaculate chef's coat, she oversaw every dish that left the kitchen, checking the details with trained eyes. Her menu was a celebration of authentic flavors and innovative techniques, inspired both by the lessons she had learned from her grandmother and her more recent experiences. Among the most famous dishes were her beet risotto with goat cheese and an orange cake with lavender cream, both featured in food magazines and blogs. That morning, as the sun illuminated the spacious kitchen of the restaurant, Clara was finalizing the tests for a new dessert. The team surrounded her, watching her intently. Clara carefully added the finishing touch to a dish composed of a sphere of dark chocolate that, when drizzled with hot caramel, opened up to reveal a passion fruit mousse. "Ready, everyone," she said, stepping back to allow everyone to see the result. "What do you think?" Her team members exchanged glances before bursting into applause and murmurs of approval. "Chef, this is going to be a hit," said one of her sous chefs with a wide smile. Clara simply smiled in response, feeling a deep gratitude for being there, doing what she loved. Meanwhile, the impact of her departure from the McAllister mansion still echoed elsewhere. Arthur McAllister, the man who had once treated her with indifference, was now facing the decline of his reputation. The businessmen who had witnessed his behavior on the fateful dinner night began to question his arrogant demeanor and the way he underestimated those around him. Reports of his disrespect towards the staff started to circulate, and meetings that once flowed easily were now tense and unproductive. For a man used to being the center of attention, the fall was hard to bear. Clara, however, had neither the time nor the interest to focus on what was left behind. Her energy was fully directed towards the future. On a quiet night, after work, she returned to her apartment, which was now a larger space in a neighborhood closer to Lumiere. Rosa, who continued to be her most loyal friend, was sitting at the kitchen table, helping her organize a recipe notebook. "You did it, Clara," Rosa said, with a warm smile. "Do you remember that night? It feels like just yesterday we were adjusting that blue dress." Clara laughed, serving 2 cups of tea. "I will never forget. You were the first person to believe I deserve more." And in a way, that dinner was the push I needed. Not because of what Arthur did, but because of what I discovered about myself. That was when I realized I didn't need to wait for anyone's approval to move forward. Rosa nodded, moved, and look where you are now. Everyone is talking about you, Clara. I see your name in magazines and on social media. You are an inspiration. Clara looked at Rosa with gratitude, holding her hand. If I am an inspiration to anyone, it's because I had you by my side to remind me of who I am. Thank you, Rosa. Later that night, Clara sat alone in the restaurant's kitchen, testing variations of a recipe for the spring menu. The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft sound of her knives chopping ingredients and the bubbling of a pot on the stove. She paused for a moment, watching the soft light from the lamps reflect off the utensils, and felt a wave of deep satisfaction. She had fought, overcome obstacles, and now she was exactly where she was meant to be, in control of her life, turning dreams into reality. When her team arrived the next morning, Clara was standing next to the bulletin board with a warm smile and contagious energy. "Good morning, everyone," she said. "We have a busy day ahead, but I know we're going to rock it. Let's show the world what Lumiere can do." The team members responded enthusiastically, driven by her passion. And thus began another successful day at the restaurant, where every dish that left the kitchen was a reflection of Clara's journey, of simplicity, overcoming, and above all, love for what she did.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These other stories will also move you. Click to continue watching.